So you spent a majority of your adult life planning for retirement and saving for that special day. When it finally comes and you retire, what process is going to change and what plans do you need in place to ensure that you're not going to run out of funds? Now, this is something that I put a lot of time and effort into because overall, I don't want to get to retirement, be 5, 10, even 15 years in, then have to go back to work because I didn't plan properly. So in today's video, we're going to be looking at a couple popular strategies on how to really manage the funds. Some of them a little more controversial than others. And starting with the first one, which is the 4% rule. Now, this one for me is very interesting because some people have said, even I know Dave Ramsey has gotten a lot of criticism about saying that you can take 8% out, you can be absolutely fine. But the 4% rule is very tried and true. This ensures that you don't run out of money during retirement. With the 4% rule, you withdraw 4%. That's right, 4% of the account balance in the first year. Then you adjust future withdrawals for inflation. Now, this is where it does get kind of crazy because if you think about inflation, if you have an account with $1 million balance, the 4% rule or the 4% withdrawn the first year would mean you're getting $40,000. Now, the $40,000 that you're getting is to supplement Social Security, but you're only taking and really removing that $40,000. If inflation was at 3%, you would increase your withdrawal by 3% in year number 2, giving you $41,200. So a little bit higher than that 4% overall. By adjusting your withdrawals for inflation, it really helps preserve the buying power because you're not taking too much out. When you start looking at this rule, and again, thinking of the 8%, what Dave Ramsey was talking about, if you're looking to take that much out of a $1 million portfolio, the first year you're taking out $80,000, you're going to be out of money very fast if you start taking that 8%, continuing with the 8%, and then of course going and taking more out from that due to inflation, it's going to go down pretty quick. Now, the only downside with this 4% rule is if you withdraw the money when the stock market declines. This is something that you really have to be cognizant of and what you have to think. If we look back, even looking at 2021, where the stock market was down 20%, if you're taking 4% out, that really, it's hard to recoup those losses because you took those losses out. You took the money out. When the stock market comes and starts recovering, like we seen in 2022, 23, 24, you're not going to have that money in there because you did take that 4% out. But of course, the 4% tried and true rule has been really in effect for decades, and it has worked incredibly well. Now, the strategy that I'm looking at that I am most vested into is the fixed dollar strategy, very similar to our 4% rule without considering inflation. This really pegs on how much money I need on a monthly basis. This is the reason why when it comes to budgeting is so expensive. So let's assume you're 70 years old, you have that $1 million account and you want it to last until you're 100. You can take around $33,000 a year, and through the growth factor that it should grow, you should be able to essentially last for 30 years on the withdrawals that you're taking out there. This, of course, makes it very easy. So if I'm saying, hey, I get $28,000 from Social Security, I want to take out $33,000 out of my retirement plan every single year. The combined total of those have to be greater than the amount that I'm spending. So that is imperative to really know. You can't go in with a fixed dollar strategy if you're taking $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 out of your $1 million account every single year. All of a sudden, you'll quickly realize that 10, 15 years later, you've depreciated and all the money is out of that account. And of course, if we have a year or two that are down, that is going to go much faster. This is a very simplified and a very popular method because it is very easy, but it can make a big difference when you start really calculating inflation. When you think of today, if you have $30,000 today, in another 5, 10, even 15 years, that same $30,000 is not going to buy the same goods and services that we has as today, which of course is really, if you're doing this for a prolonged period of time, I know Social Security is going to be adjusted for inflation, but through this withdrawal method, you are not going to be adjusted for inflation. Now, the next one we look at is dividend withdrawals. This is another one that a lot of people have talked about, including Dave Ramsey. When you have a sizable retirement fund, we're talking like $2, $3, $4, $5 million. You can go ahead, withdraw your dividends that are coming, your interest that you're earning, and live off that in its entirety, meaning you are going to leave your principal intact. Now, this again is another theory that I've heard from a lot of different people, including Dave Ramsey, when he talks about you don't want to kill the golden goose, you only want the eggs. This ensures 100% guaranteed if you stick to this method, that your account not only is going to grow over time, but you are never going to run out of money because, again, inherently you're not taking out the principal. If I have a $3 million portfolio and I have those dividends deposited into my personal account, that portfolio going up, going down, whatever growth method we have, I am only taking the dividends in the entirety. Now, of course, with this one, there are two big downsides for this, and it makes a big difference when you look at the annual withdrawals. They could fluctuate, making it a lot more difficult to budget, which is huge. And of course, depending on the account performance, you might want inflation, and it could be concerning again, depending on where inflation is. If it's at 2%, if it's at 3%, great. We know everything's good. We know retirement is going to be well. But when we start thinking of 5, 6, 7, 8, almost 9% inflation, that can be devastating when it comes to consumer price index and how expensive these goods and services have been getting. Final one we look at is the bucket strategy. This, of course, is breaking it into a couple different buckets. And this, again, is where it really got my mind thinking. And when it comes to the bucket strategy, there's really 3 separate buckets. And that's exactly what we're going to have when I come to retirement. First bucket is mostly cash equivalent. This is the money that we have in those high yield savings accounts. This is the money, not the set aside emergency fund money, but this is fund and really money that we have sitting aside. This is going to cover living expenses for the next couple of years. The second bucket is going to be really that retirement income that we're going to have to take. When we start looking at the traditional IRAs, the traditional 401ks, and then we start looking at the Roth variation. And of course, the second bucket, like we talked about, is going to be the fixed income. That is going to be the securities. That is going to be the bonds. It could be CDs, but it is also going to be something that is going to come with RMDs. We know as of right now, they move the age to 73. So when I get to 73, I am going to be required by law to start taking our MDs or required minimum distributions out of my investment accounts. Now, of course, the final bucket and the last bucket would be that Roth after-tax bucket. But systematically, when you start thinking of this, when you start thinking of bucket number 1, using our CDs, using the high yield savings accounts, using that money to supplement some Social Security, that is the lowest, the absolute lowest paying dividend money that you're going to have. When we look at that second bucket, that's starting to get into those investment funds. That's starting to get into the IRA money. But again, you are required by law to take them on the RMDs. And the final bucket, if we do get to that very last bucket, is going to be our tax-free growth income. And of course, all the money we take out of there at that point is going to be completely tax-free because that's going to be the Roth variation. So it is a really good strategy. But with this final strategy, with the bucket strategy, it does take a lot more discipline. It also does take a lot more planning. When you start taking funds out of your RMD, when you start taking funds out of different accounts, you have to really plan exactly what you're going to get, and also knowing the balances where, again, in a traditional account, if I'm sitting on $1 or $2 million, it might make a lot of sense to start converting that once I do retire if I don't need the funds, but start doing some of that Roth conversion. So taking some of the money in those IRA accounts, start turning it into a Roth conversion, paying taxes on them, and making sure that we're getting some of the money or really stacking up a lot more money into the Roth accounts. When again, you start looking at these RMDs, they're saying in 2033, which I know a couple of years out, 9 years out is quite a ways away, but the RMD age at that time is planning to go to 75. So again, I think another 9 years, I'm going to be 54 years old, not even close to the RMD age, but they're going to be moving it and plan on moving it to the age of 75 because people are living a lot longer. That could make a really big difference with how much we have in the account and exactly how we do take our funds out. So, all right, guys, so definitely you have to plan if you're doing early retirement, late retirement. If you want to retire in your lifetime, you really have to know and create a very substantial withdrawal strategy so you know exactly you're not going to run out of money during retirement, and it is going to be fully funded to the retirement that you want. All right, guys, so that is going to do it for today's video. Let me know in the comments what you guys think, and as always, thank you guys for watching.